Government contracting is complicated, but it really doesn't have to be. You don't know what you don't know, so be in the know. Join us for the Deltek GovCon coffee show, where industry thought leaders discuss all things government contracting, with your hosts, Elizabeth Jimenez and Wolf Thiers. How are you?
Good, I am good. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
I know, I always have such great conversations with you, so
it is.
Excited. Who do we have today?
So today we have Brad Mitchell from NeoSystems. So joining us today is Brad.
Thank you. Happy to be part of the conversation.
Absolutely. Glad to have you here. So maybe you could tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I work for NeoSystems, of course. I'm vice president of in the professional services side of the organization. We have a number of different aspects of NeoSystems. So I work in professional services on the consulting side, oversee the tech group and the PMO office and a few other business streams there.
So super important things.
Super busy, you sound
Super
like.
busy,
I
yeah.
I think so, I guess.
Yes. Yeah.
So you've been around the Deltek Costpoint product for a while now then.
Yeah, even before Costpoint was kind of around, I've used GCS, even System 1 time or two, and done many GCS to Costpoint migrations. I actually come from the functional side, so initially I was at one point a VP of Finance, a large government contractor. We used Costpoint, worked with a few companies before that that were GCS clients.
Okay, yeah. So you've seen the evolution of the product from the System 1 early days all the way through to the...
From the ground up, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of dating myself a bit.
Well, you know, I wasn't trying to emphasize that, Brad. I'm not trying to emphasize that.
You don't look a day older than... Not gonna say it.
Fair enough. I'll take it.
So, but now that you've been around Costpoint for a while, but you know that, I don't know in your experience at the contractor, but you've surely seen Costpoint being used not as a standalone system, but sort of with other pieces within a company's IT landscape, right?
Absolutely, and obviously this need has existed for a long time, even GCS and up to Costpoint 6.0 or Costpoint 6, but Costpoint 7 and above have really made that pretty exciting. Right, so there's whole new methodologies now for interacting with other systems that before with client-server versions of Costpoint or standalone applications like GCS, people struggled a lot more with.
Right, that whole application interface was not as strong as it is today.
Right.
Yeah.
So now everything is kind of up to date and just in the pre-planning for what's coming next in 2022. It's all web.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So Costpoint with Costpoint 7, they completely transitioned from a client server to a web-based platform, which they really rewrote, as you know, with the whole thing under the hood, right? It's a totally different technology underlying it now. And they did a fantastic job of giving the ability for people to customize or integrate Costpoint 7 a lot more than you ever could before, specifically with things called Extensibilities and Web Services. So extensibilities are kind of a layer that floats on top of the standard Costpoint 1 functionality. This is fully supported by Deltek and was designed specifically with customers in mind, that you can do many, many things with extensibilities. You can customize screens, you can actually add new screens, and then of course the key piece, you can interface with external systems. And it can really be for simple things like kind of modifying screens. It can be done by really end users with not a lot of technical expertise. Just a little bit of training.
Use it, right?
You could use it, absolutely. And then to get very complex and interface with larger systems, then maybe some developers might be needed or some consultants, right? So a little bit of both. And then the other option is web services, right? So web services, Costpoint can actually expose data securely inside a customer system, whether they're in a cloud or still have an on-premise solution. So that external systems can kind of push data into Costpoint or pull data out. So we see a lot of this these days. Not everyone has settled on Deltek products for everything, right? So those that do have external systems, maybe a workflow system or something like that, can still integrate with their ERP system via web services.
Well, that was going to be my question. So like what types of other systems are we talking about here? Like you mentioned something about workflow. What are the other types?
So workflow is a big one, right? Because that can have a lot of integration if they want a very robust workflow system or something they use maybe for other applications in their ecosystem. right? But they want to interface with Costpoint ERP system in one part of it. That's certainly a good example. Workflow we see a lot. But then your standard kind of systems they want to interface with, if they want to automatically push data to a bank, right, to make payments. Payroll systems are big, and even HR systems, those that don't use the Deltek talent management solution, might use another one out there. They want to interface back and forth with those HR systems. So it really runs all across the board.
But and there's no real limitation as to what part of Costpoint you can integrate to, right? I mean, it's not like only this part or this screen of Costpoint's exposed to web services.
No, that's the beauty of it. Well, like you can really integrate with any existing screen in Costpoint. And the nice thing about it, it's almost, it really is the validation and everything that happens via the web services is exactly as if you were entering data in the front end, right? So if you wanted to push, for example, like an AP voucher into Costpoint, you would have that same front end validation as if one of your employees were sitting there and doing it themselves.
That's excellent because, bad data destroys businesses. It spends so much time reconciling, figuring out where that bad data came from. So having the validations up front really is important.
No, that makes total sense.
It's a huge advantage for exactly the reason you're saying, because of course in the old days we could push data into Costpoint databases, right? But you're pushing tables directly in the database. You're not doing that front end validation. And those people that use Costpoint know account org links are present or something like that. That's always kind of a gotcha, right? So all of that kind of validation occurs. And the other exciting thing is you can actually interface web services within Costpoint itself, right? So you can actually create applications in Costpoint that might do something very unique to your business, exchange data back and forth with an external system, and then via web services, again, maybe create an AP voucher or an employee master record right there within Costpoint using web services in and of itself, right?
All right, so you're really extending the application in that way of what the system can do, but then really adding, again, another application on top of it to make it do even more.
Exactly.
How long have you been doing this with these types of extensibilities? Like you're basically taking the ERP, yes, you're taking the ERP system and really like just extending it. You're making it as extensive as it can go. So you're building in all sorts of directions. How long has that been going on?
It's been going on since Costpoint 7.0, right? And me in particular, I do still have technical skills, and I was one of the first ones to jump on extensibility when I saw it because I was very excited about it. And it's like a lot of products you see. So take cell phones, for example, right? When you'll get a new operating system or something or an application on a cell phone, it's kind of basic at first and it evolves over time. So those of us that were developing extensibilities initially, I remember the first one I did was like a contract master screen, something Costpoint didn't have, and we would incorporate that on the project screen. So we added a new tab and a bunch of fields that government contractors care about. Very kind of basic extension, but did its job really well. But then as more and more people developed, and Deltek and NeoSystems, we always are kind of collaborating with each other, and you learn new tips and tricks, it kind of evolves, right? So now you see a lot more sophisticated type of interfaces, like, again, a workflow system, whether it be Power Automate or Integrify or something like that, may push AP vouchers through or vendor approvals, and we get those seamless integration back and forth with Costpoint. Is just really exciting to see these days.
Right. And then you take things like that extension you talk about. Deltek then creates the product and says there's a contract module there, right, which I know we'll talk to someone else later about that. But think that that doesn't really affect the core code, right? So at that point, they can then move on to the Deltek product and really not impact their ability to upgrade, correct?
Exactly right. That's one of the beautiful things about extensions is they are very segregated from the core functionality of Costpoint. And unless Deltek changes like a fundamental data structure or something that we rely on in the extension, it'll survive patch after patch, upgrade after upgrade, right? Even new version upgrades. And we've seen that already since extensions I've developed back in 7.0 keep working straight through unless there's a fundamental change in the underlying database.
Yeah, which is why you read the release notes, right?
Exactly. Very closely, every time.
So that's extensions you're talking about are doing other processes within Costpoint. But there's other ways to automate things that are happening in Costpoint, right? Is it just with extensions, or are there other ways to automate?
Costpoint does offer a lot more, especially now that we're getting in 8.1. There's a lot, and even back in 8.0 and the 7.1 days, a lot more automation and workflow abilities in there. As you probably know, Wolf, they developed the new workflow, right?
Workflow. It even says workflow new in the screen,
Yes.
just in case you want to know.
Still says it in the menu that way. And that's a great application that interfaces really with any Costpoint application, right? There was workflow old, they don't title it that, right, Wolf? That had a little more limited functionality and applied really well to a few modules, and they had some workflow like in purchase requisitions. But this new workflow, really you can apply almost to any screen in Costpoint. So it's very much like content management integration, right? You can apply it wherever kind of needed. So a lot of exciting features that, and I hear 8.1, I haven't read in detail all of the release notes. We just actually installed one here at NeoSystems in the last week or so. So I'm excited to see a lot of the promises we're hearing that's coming from 8.1.
So you mentioned content management integration. For anyone that doesn't know, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Content management integration. So this was, again, another great feature Deltek put in there to allow Costpoint to interact with any document repository, almost any document repository. A lot of customers use SharePoint, right? That's a common one out there. But I've seen it integrate with Box, a few lesser known ones. And it's a very kind of generalized deployment, right? So whatever your content management system is, more than likely Costpoint's going to be able to connect to that. And then you can add the ability on almost any Costpoint screen to add attachments directly in Costpoint, or store those attachments, those documents in your document management system and associate them with records with Costpoint. And it uses what's called metadata. Most people are familiar with metadata. So a common example, customers want to put vouchers that they get from vendors onto an AP voucher screen, right? So they can do content management integration. They can associate metadata fields like the vendor number and the invoice ID from the vendor with that, store it up in their repository, and then even people that don't have accounts in Costpoint itself can go search based on that criteria to go find any kind of document backup that they want.
Certainly helps when the auditor comes calling and
I
says,
know.
show me the backup for this.
I know.
It really does. The auditor will walk in and say, I want to see this invoice ID from this vendor, this one, this one, this one. You search it in the repository and hand it off to them. I've seen it happen.
How long does it take to build one of these extensibilities in general?
So back to extensibilities, it really, unfortunately it's the consultant answer, right? It depends. How complex it is. Simple ones, if you're kind of rearranging screens or adding additional fields to screens, which you can also do with extensibility, you can really have something in place in a couple weeks' time, honestly, right? Especially with a consultant that has experience doing it. But very complex integrations, especially where you're integrating with an external workflow tool, let's say, that you haven't used before, you're not familiar with, it can be a few months to 6 months, I'd say, as a rough time frame. That's what I usually quote to clients. So unfortunately, it is kind of the standard, it depends answer.
Well, if you need to have something built that's completely customized for you yourself, then you have to, it's value. So you have to take the time to do it.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And test it thoroughly.
And test it thoroughly.
Always
Those
test.
of us who don't like to put it straight in production.
Test, and retest.
Right.
Absolutely.
Retest.
Want to make sure we get that right.
Yeah, exactly.
Just perfectionism.
So when we think about other aspects of digital transformation and really bringing everyone to this, that paperless office that we were always promised years ago,
Yep.
Which feels ever closer every day, with the way technology is going. We also hear about robotic process automation. And I know that Deltek has another partner, Lirium, which uses UiPath for that. Do you have any experience with robotic process automation?
We have a little experience with it. We've tried, we've developed some solutions for customers. I am excited about that relationship with Costpoint. UiPath is a pretty well-known solution out there. And a lot of the 8.1 and beyond features that are going to come out are going to be a lot more supportive of that. So really, extensibilities and web services are the two key features of Costpoint that are going to be able to enable this.
That absolutely. We've been talking about the enablers for RPA, and now we finally can get there.
Exactly. You have kind of all the tools in place right now, and it's matured enough. People understand how to use it. So now we can take kind of that next step, like you're saying. So it's exciting times.
That is exciting.
It sounds like there's a huge Candylicious world out there for anyone that wants to do something to Costpoint. Do you have any words of caution for people thinking, oh my God, I can do everything with this?
Well, I think that is exactly the word of caution, right? So when now that Extensibility's been around, at least people have heard about it, right, a little bit, and then you'll tell a customer and you're kind of demo a couple of things you've done, and then they suddenly, their eyes light up and they want the world, right? So the thing is you just got to kind of pace it the right way. Don't take on too much at one time, especially when you're integrating with other systems. Focus on individual steps to get you to your ultimate goal. So if it's you're interfacing with an external payroll system that might be your HR book of record and your payroll, runs your payroll, focus on just one of those two pieces first. You're going to work out all the kinks for the communication, how to exchange the data. You can get something in place that's usable for you and then kind of take the next step. So kind of pace it a little bit and don't try to take on an overly complex project initially would be my best advice.
Do you have like a, to that end, do you have like a prescription that you start with companies where you're saying, okay, I would do these extensibilities first and then build on that? Like, do you have kind of a plan or a package that you presented?
We do. I mean, so a lot of people that are coming in, they want, again, like they want interfaces with other systems, and they want, basically what they're wanting at the end of the day is to conform to a business process that's unique to them, right? So we'll usually start with, okay, well, let's make the Costpoint side support that need that you have. So if there's additional data elements you're going to be exchanging with another system, well, let's put an extension in place, very simple one that just starts tracking that data, right? We're not interfacing yet, but let's get it in place and track that data and kind of do that throughout Costpoint where you need it. And then we'll tackle the integration from that point, right? So it'd be kind of a logical step, taking off easier pieces, agile development, right? I guess in a sense that a lot of the world is kind of following these days.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic.
That helps you, eat that apple one bite at a time.
Right.
There you go, right?
Right? We don't want
Instead of choking on the whole thing at one time. Yeah.
It's really like the whole consulting piece, right? So you know what makes sense, and then you kind of say, let's do these pieces first, and it always works for the client. So.
Right.
Especially when you're talking about something like Costpoint, which is a hugely complex ERP in and of itself. Certainly the change management that goes along with putting in a new ERP has a big significance to that. So if you try and put more extensions, more integrations on top of that, you can get to a very large project.
Right.
So certainly we want to be mindful of scope, right?
Right, exactly.
that good old consulting word, scope.
Yeah, and exactly, and sometimes you got to keep it even simpler, right? So one of the features I think we were talking about the other day is user interface profiles in Costpoint, right? Very powerful tool that a lot of customers aren't aware of, and they'll come in and say, I want to hide this field or just show this field for certain users or whatever. That actually can all be done through the front end of Costpoint and user interface profiles. Don't spend a ton of money doing extensibilities when there actually are other features in Costpoint that can do some things for you.
Right. There are ways to tailor Costpoint for you without necessarily going down this route. So that's where consulting and a good experienced consultant helps, understanding what you need and what actual tool you want to be using to achieve that goal.
Exactly.
It's a very important piece.
Exactly.
Are there any other things any words of wisdom you want to leave us with?
Again, I think there's a lot of exciting technologies out there. It can be overwhelming, right? I'm not a salesman, but find a good, trusted resource, a consultant to kind of help you guide through the clutter out there, because customers do tend to get overwhelmed when they start picking up the phone and saying, I want to integrate with this other external system, and they'll get all these options kind of thrown at them. Find a good, trusted resource and let them navigate you through it. And then again, kind of bite the apple, like Wolf's analogy, bite the apple one piece at a time. Get the little pieces you can get done, and then tackle the bigger ones towards the end.
I appreciate your
Very
time.
good.
I think
Thank you
it's been
so
extremely
much.
informative.
I do too. I learned a lot, and it's helpful. I don't use Costpoint every day, but if I did, I would definitely
We're
want to
gonna
have
change
this
that
type.
soon, Elizabeth.
Yes, I hope so. Been wanting to work on that. Thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Great
Hope
to
talk
see
you
you.
guys again.